The Final Destination series is in the midst of a near 13-year break, but thankfully that should be ending next year with the 6th entry in the series. But there was another time when the franchise seemed as good as dead. After The Final Destination came out, it seemed like it was the end of any cheating of death. But thankfully Eric Heiserer came along with a script that would blow audiences away. So we're getting into all of the gymnastics mishaps, terrible bridge construction, and massages with a not-so-happy ending as we look at what the f*** happened to Final Destination 5.
The lucky few survive the disaster, and then one by one, death comes for them all.
After the 4th entry in the series, Warner Brothers, having bought New Line Cinema in 2008, considered Final Destination to be donezo. At least they did for all of 1 year, because the head of New Line, Alan Horn, announced in 2010 that they were developing a film from one of the writers of the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, Eric Heiserer. I'm sure you're thinking, wait, how did he manage to book that job after making what is easily one of the worst remakes of all time? Well, his script here was killer, and sometimes that's all it takes. And I don't want to get into spoilers just yet, so we'll save the details of that for a little later. Steve Quayle was one of James Cameron's second unit directors on both Titanic and Avatar, so he was able to snag the directing gig. Not wanting to go for a typical naming approach, New Line Cinema announced that the film would be named Final Destination, which may just be the worst name in existence. Thankfully, they reversed their decision after some intense backlash. But what is Final Destination 5 even about? Well, we follow a paper company. Hey, they were really popular in this era apparently, as they're going on a company retreat. But then things get all Final Destination-y when the suspension bridge they use collapses, and Sam Lawton has a vision of it all. While he's able to save them, death eventually comes for everyone that escaped the bridge accident, and it is ruthless. Casting of the film happened very quickly, with Miles Fisher being the first announced cast member. You may remember him from the American Psycho parody music video, which is an absolute banger. For the lead, Nicholas DeGasto landed the part of Sam Lawton, and this is my opportunity to shout out Trial and Error, which is an amazing first season, and DeGasto is in the lead role. Please check it out. Then, having been one of Jason's victims in the Friday the 13th reboot, Arlen Escarpeta won a role. The cast was filled out with people like David Koechner, Emma Bell, Jacqueline McCannis Wood, Ellen Rowe, and PJ Byrne. Now that's one Canadian cast. Thankfully, after not appearing in the 4th entry, Tony Todd returned as William Bloodworth, morgue tech who knows a lot more than he's letting on. And the franchise got a bit of prestige with Courtney B. Vance taking on the role of FBI agent Jim Block. I always enjoyed this element of the Final Destination movies, so I was glad that they brought it back. They also continue the trend of naming characters after various horror movie filmmakers. Candace Hooper is named after Toby Hooper, Olivia Castle is named after William Castle, then Peter Friedkin is named for the late great William Friedkin. I'd say the names are a little more subtle than Chaney and Hitchcock. Unlike the prior entry, which had filmed in New Orleans, Final Destination 5 was filmed in its usual haunting grounds of Vancouver, Canada. The opening bridge collapse was filmed both on a set, but also on the Lionsgate Bridge in Vancouver. No relation. This was still in the midst of the 3D movie trend, so this would also be filmed in that format. But this would also end up being the first Final Destination released on IMAX. Taking the opening credits from the prior sequel, where we see the X-rayed versions of various deaths in the franchise, they've kept a similar look but grounded it a bit. Shot in camera, we get various objects flying through glass at the screen, and it makes for some very cool visuals. And YouTube is getting more and more stingy with the violence, even though it's very clearly fake and from a movie, so I can't show you damn near anything here and I apologize. But let's get into it. The suspension bridge features a ton of visual effects and provides some really great tension building. It's interesting to see just how many elements in this sequence were CGI, because there are some that you might not expect. It's also the longest opening accident of the entire franchise. And shout out to Emma Bell, who had to scream her heart out during the scene, even when she's not a main feature in it. Maybe it's just because my stepmom is a gymnastics coach, so I've been around the sport for a long time, but nothing gets to me more than the gymnastics death. This girl has been set up as an absolute sweetheart, and they do a wonderful job of teasing all of the different things that could easily kill her. This scene is a great example of Quayle's great eye.
Especially the hands, because it's like gripping the hands or being on the bar when she goes from one bar to the other. So anticipate it. So you're on this bar, and then her hands come into it, and that's a cutting point.
Many of the deaths in the film are based on real incidents. Isaac's death was based on someone who was getting acupuncture who fell off the table and one of the needles punctured their heart. Obviously, they go a bit further in the movie, but it's a moment that everyone can wince at. We just won't touch on the rather racist dialogue during the massage.
Okay, I'm sorry. Do you come with subtitles?
Whoops. But this scene almost ended much differently, with the original intention that Isaac gets engulfed in flames after standing in a puddle of alcohol. Thank God for Buddha's inclusion. Olivia's scene was also altered slightly. While just one of her eyes is burned in the film, an alternate scene shows both of her eyes being burnt up. One visual trick that they used repeatedly was filming the real-life human in one shot with a dummy filled with all sorts of blood and gore in another take. They would combine the two shots and get some ooey gooey results. There are also some pretty fun moments here, like Olivia knocking a picture off her desk that was taken at the Devil's Flight roller coaster, you know, the one from part 3. Then there's Roy standing next to this race car, which just so happens to be the same car that crashed in The Final Destination. We've also even got the log truck from Final Destination 2 making an appearance. Heck, even the restaurant that Sam works at is the same one seen at the end of the first film. There's so many connections here. And spoilers for this decade-plus-old movie, but the aspect that really stuns is when it's revealed that the events we've seen actually take place before the infamous Flight 180. This is a prequel. But it's unfortunate for our two leads because the entire audience knows what's going to be happening to them in no time flat. But it's a great way to show that death never stops. And even the first film wasn't the beginning of this kind of thing happening. And it's also really cool to see the Flight 180 crash from a different angle. And it's great that we don't just have characters looking up these past incidents and immediately knowing what's happening. While sure it cuts down on exposition in the other films, it would have been very tired to do it again. So the change seems to work. One of the absolute best elements of Final Destination 5 is its mythology on how to defeat death. In past films, we've seen that new life can help, but for the most part, death comes to these folks no matter what they do. But this film introduces the concept of murdering someone else to take your place. It gives us what the Final Destination series has always been lacking, a human villain. Sure, they use Ian McKinley in a similar role in the third one, but he mostly taunts versus actually trying to kill someone. Here, Peter is an absolute maniac, having lost his girlfriend and obsessing over death coming for them. He even almost pushes a woman into traffic. He sees Sam and Molly's relationship and doesn't understand why they're deserving of happiness over him. It's easy to see where Peter is coming from, even if he takes some rather excessive means to do so. And I also love that the movie doesn't even confirm that this technique works, as everyone in the film ends up dead, even those who seemingly took another's life. Brian Tyler returned to score the film, and while Shirley Walker's style is certainly missed, I absolutely loved her. Tyler manages to bring a great deal of tension and suspense. The franchise continues its usage of on-the-nose music and suspenseful moments. We've got Dust in the Wind playing during the bridge sequence, and it's so perfect. Final Destination 5 released in the United States on August 12, 2011, and brought in $18.4 million on its opening weekend. The movie would end its worldwide run at $157.6 million. But with just $42 million of that being earned domestically, This was officially the lowest grossing entry of the franchise. But it was well liked, earning a B+ audience rating and cinema score, with the critical consensus on Rotten Tomatoes being that it's still only for the gore-thirsty faithful, but Final Destination 5 represents a surprising return to form for the franchise. For the movie's promotion, Miles Fisher released a music video called New Romance, which featured the cast of FD5 recreating Saved by the Bell, only with a twist. It's a fun video, and I highly recommend you checking it out. Another bit of promotion that ended up causing a stir for the studio was the Advertising Standards Authority in the UK, who banned the original poster as it was likely to cause fear and undue stress in children. Excuse me, what? Warner Brothers countered, but the ASA stood their ground. What say you? Is this poster too traumatizing for children to see? Unfortunately, despite a positive response and an impressive international box office, we're still waiting on a 6th installment. Tony Todd had even been hopeful of them filming 6 and 7 back-to-back, but as the years went on, this plan disappeared. In 2019, Saw sequel writers Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan were hired to write a reimagining. But yet again, that never happened. But with Spider-Man No Way Home director John Watts boarding as a producer, and directors Zach Lipovsky and Adam B. Stein on board, it finally appears to be on the fast track. Let's just hope that they continue to go hard with the violence, while expanding upon the mythology in an interesting way. I guess only time will tell.
Oh my god, that's so awesome!